2, 1. Please share with us your testimony, Nancy.
Thank you so much, Pastor Mark. And thank you so much for all of you being here. Sister Lori, Sister Abigail, Brother Lonnie, Brother Bernard, Brother Ron, and Brother Jonathan. Wow. And I know that the Lastimoso children are there too with his wife. Such a blessing to have everyone. And it's a beautiful, I don't know how it is in other places, but where I'm at, it's a sunny, fresh, beautiful Sabbath morning. It could not be any nicer. And my testimony is all the way to this very minute. I would put my face on, but whenever I do, you seem to not hear me. Can everyone hear me okay now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Just great.
Yes.
Great. Yeah, whenever I have my video, it for some reason takes away my reception. But yes, I don't know if anyone has known to begin with what happened last night in my area, but that is all, like I said, part of the testimony of my life. There was a river of tornado warnings for 3 states, including mine. And it was a pretty relentless in the sense of how it hit many areas very hard. And the only reason I can say is God's protection is the only explanation, because where I am, there was not even any strong winds. There was just some, heavy rain, and that was it. So again, it's testimony of God's power, his protection, his love that is beyond any words can describe. So yes, during the time though, it's very frightening. I try to always remember when Jesus was in the boat, and there was a very strong storm, and everyone was just like, oh no, Jesus, wake up, please help us. And he says, do you not have any faith? So I try to remember that at all times. Not only that, I happen to live in a mobile home. And so, every earthly reasoning says you'll be taken out, right? Every earthly thing says, oh no, where are you located? Oh, you're in a mobile home. Oh no. However, that's another blessing that God has given me, where the neighbor that I have in front of me is an older lady. She lives there alone, and she has a great storm cellar in her front yard where I have access to. So she allows me to go whenever I need it, and it's definitely accessible enough. And so that in itself is a blessing. I didn't have to pay for it because they're not cheap. They're not cheap at all. So that's something else that God said to me. He winks down at me so many times, and it's always in the details too. I there's so many details I can say, but because I have such a short period of time, I have to, leave those out. But the point is that the details are where God really shows me how much he lives and how much he loves. Starting out my age, I guess that the best thing is, where I'm at today. This month I will be 48 years old. So I'm much closer to 50 than 20. I'm no longer closer to 20. So I have lived almost 50 years. So, that's considerable. That's much more than an 18-year-old could say, or that I was able to say. So given my age, I grew up in the 80s. And in the 80s, I'll go back in time, I'm a second generation Seventh-day Adventist. My grandmother actually became a colporteur. I can never say it in English. Spanish is my first language, so colportora is in Spanish, but colporteur, she became that once she heard voice of prophecy. And before then, she was, of course, a Catholic. I'm sure not many of you are surprised to hear that. Um, and my grandfather, I'm not sure, I never met my grandfather because he died before, but he was definitely not Seventh-day Adventist, but he also converted. And that was when my mother was a toddler. She must have been like 1 or 2 years old, like the age of Pastor Mark's children. So that was so my mother grew up in the Seventh-day Adventist environment as well. So like everyone she lived around were Seventh-day Adventists. So she was really submerged into that. And so I came up with that upbringing. I knew the Ten Commandments. I knew the pillars of the SDA. I knew Ellen White's writings. And this was every Sabbath of my childhood until I was 20 years old, just to have an idea. It was rain or shine every Sabbath morning. As a young child, I always knew that we were preparing ourselves Sabbath morning to meet Jesus. I always remember that. Oh, we're going to meet Jesus. And I would say, I was little, I was in grade school or younger, and I would always say, so Jesus will be there? And my mom would say, oh, of course he will. He will see us. That's why we have to be at our best, because Jesus and God the Father will be there, and I was just so happy. I was like, oh yes. And my mother would even make me choose dress patterns and fabric, and she would have the seamstress that was in the church make the dresses for me. And the whole time she was saying, we have to glorify God in what we wear when we meet him. It was just so in my head, at the time. And, that was just my joy, my happiness was Sabbath. And my older sister would play the piano. And she would always play so beautifully. Like she knew, and it was so easy for her. And her favorite to play were hymns. And so on Friday nights, she would play the hymns on the piano. And my older sister is about 9 years older than me. So she always loved the Sabbath as well. And I always, would share with her that love for the Sabbath. Now, I grew up with 4 siblings. I'm in the middle. So I had my older sister, then my older brother, then me, then my younger sister and younger brother. So I come from a pretty big family, I would say. And I think it's important to mention that my mother divorced my father when I was 3 years old, and I never met him or spoken with him since then. So it is important to my testimony in the sense of, my father was not there. And what I did hear about him from my family is very negative things. So I never had any positive knowledge about my father. However, I did grow up with a stepfather who was also Seventh-day Adventist. My mother met him at the Seventh-day Adventist church. And so I grew up with him. I can't say I had much of a relationship with him because he worked 2 jobs and he was most of the time out of the house. The only times I remember him being there were the Sabbath, and our Sabbath days were mostly in the church. So we stayed there morning and afternoons, usually growing up. Now, I also have to say that we grew up priding ourselves in attending the Spanish SDA church. And the reason I say that is because we would always say, oh yeah, the English speaking churches are so liberal, you know. We're like, we cannot attend those are just
That's right.
way out of control. We're like, and there were a few times that we visited them, and I could always sense a mega church feel, you know, in the English. I was just the way they dressed, everything. I just knew, you know, since a young child that, wow, they're so liberal. And we did pride ourselves in being conservative. And I'm talking about when I was my obviously my younger years in the early 80s, because things changed along the time frame. Um, and by the time it was 84, my older sister, she moved to where we're from, Argentina, to pursue her nursing degree in Argentina. So that influence went away. Um, and so I was left with my other siblings who did never really showed the love for the Sabbath, the love for the things of God, other than my older sister that I can remember. So I was left with the rest. Also, my mother divorced my stepfather when I was a teenager as well. So that was I was in the middle, you know, tell your mother such and such, and tell your stepdad such and such. So I was the middle person in there. So I experienced firsthand the whole divorce, which is not a positive experience at all. And before then, though, I did recall that my stepfather wanted to move to the country, and my mother would not. So that was another thing that, and I knew also, by the way, I knew who was the man of sin, who I knew a lot of Bible prophecy. I knew about the climate, everything that Ellen White wrote about the last days, basically, you know, about how the climate would be, how the National Sunday Law, all of those things, you know, the papacy. I just grew up with knowing those things. And of course, the Ten Commandments were really, you know, talked about a lot. And so as my teenage years started progressing, things were not so conservative anymore, even in the Spanish churches. And by the way, the Spanish church that we were attending was in the LA County, Los Angeles County in California, Glendale, Burbank area, if anyone knows that area at all. And they were small churches, and yeah, that's what I was going to say about that. I learned a lot from those churches. But then, when my sister left, my other siblings wanted to go to the English ones. And one of the churches we ended up going was the City Glendale Church, who happens to be extremely liberal, in the sense that they actually would allow homosexual members to be part of the church. And this was not you know, this was back in time, early 90s time. And so the you know, a lot of things were changing into a very liberal, apostate. And I didn't know, you know, why those things were happening like I know now. You know, you have to go back into what we know, and what, you know, the confusion in my mind was great. And I didn't understand what was going on. Um, how what else can I say after that? Oh yes, I ended up leaving my home when I was 20 years old. Um, on my birthday, on my 20th birthday, actually, when it was very, very cold and wintry and very rainy. I left without a car, without money, nothing. And the big reason, to sum it up, was that at the time, my mother was a realtor, a successful real estate agent, and some of her clients were coming in, and I didn't know why that was, but I did notice that they were helping her do like, now that I do know, because she admitted it herself years later, that she started doing like witchcraft things. And the her clients told her that those things would protect her from any evil, because after the divorce, she was, panicking about things happening to our house. And I noticed that a lot of negative things were going on. A lot of abuse was going on, actually, that I lived on a regular daily basis. Later on in life, I I listened to a lot of people saying that they had alcoholic parents, yet one or the other. I never noticed any alcohol per se in my home, but yet the behaviors were exactly like that. I mean, completely erratic, completely out of control. I mean, and at the time I was like, wow, the Bible says, one thing, but like I see the opposite, and in my very own home, that was the scariest thing I've ever. I didn't know what my mother was doing at the time, like I said, but I knew it was really, really, really bad, to the point that I had to leave, even in under my conditions, which, like I said, I had no money, no car, no nothing. So the only person that I could go to live was my ex-boyfriend at the time. Um, and of course, when the SDA church found out, who I was living with, they never asked me what was wrong. Why did you leave your home? None of that. It was just, you have to go back to your house until you get married. uh and that was when I asked them for food, because I had no food even. So every like on Sundays or something, they would do like Dorcas. In Spanish is Dorcas, like, giving away food and things like that. And they would say, no, we're sorry, we can't give you any food because you're living with your boyfriend and not your mother. So needless to say, I stopped going to church. And that was not the only reason too. Like I said, the church was just so out of control by then, and that was in 95, because I moved out November of 94. So by the mid 90s, the church was just, hey, it was just really off. Like, I knew the difference. I knew, since I was, young, to where it was at that time, and I knew I didn't want any part of it. So, unfortunately, though, living in the LA County area and not knowing anyone, that was religious, not having any affiliation with anyone, um, my faith just deteriorated. Not only that, but I also was wondering, wow, if God is there, how could he let all this happen? I didn't understand. I was just the most confused. That's all I can say. Not only that, but I was also broken, because I lived with abuse, and that's in my own home, where I had no control. I had absolutely zero control over that. So that's very, very frightening, and no other than from your own family. A lot of times I've heard people say my father was very mean, but my mother was nice. I couldn't say that. I had my stepfather, that was really not in my life very much. And at that time, he was gone, completely gone. And my mother was the one being very abusive. Um, and my siblings as well. It was all together, and like a package deal. And so, what was I going to say? So when I left, I pursued teaching. So what I was doing is I was working full time in public schools as a speech therapist assistant. And then after that, which was 8 hours every day, I would go to college, and all of that in a city bus in the San Fernando Valley, where there were drug dealers everywhere and street prostitutes. I mean, every people would ask me, because I had to be at the bus stop for the bus. They would say, do you happen to be a prostitute? And I would say, well, no. And I was all covered up too, especially when the winter, when I was left, I had bundled up with my big coat and everything. So I don't understand why they were asking me that. But, and then I realized it's because it was so prevalent in the area. It was just all over the place. And I would see the cops, running up and down, that main boulevard. So looking back, of course, retrospectively, there's no way I should still be alive. I mean, I was, and very, very soon after I moved in by myself. I left once I was able to have my job and have my income coming in. I broke away, and I started living by myself since then. And that didn't take too long. I think it took less than a year for that to happen. In any case, I was in I was pursuing. So I was going full time to school at Cal State Northridge, and full time going, and on the weekends I just had enough time to catch up on my homework, which was plenty, and just get some sleep. I was just so tired, because that's my time and energy was completely taken, for the most part. And I guess I wanted to prove that I could still make it, even being on my own. And I really wanted to have an education. I really, because my mom would always say those things like, you need an education because you don't want to rely on a man. She would always say that to me at being young. You want to be independent, and if you're in a bad situation, you can get out. And so she did teach me that all my life that I can remember. And so what how can I jump to, because of time changes, at the age of, I was almost 40, 39 and a half specifically, and that was in 2014, where I became a teacher. So I was teaching. I have like 25 years experience being teaching in any type of capacity in the public schools. And I've also noticed a huge decline in every way, not just with children, in every possible way you can think of. The level of just corruption and evil doesn't even say that doesn't even describe it. There's words that I just can't even get to, because it's so bad. um Needless to say, the abuse continued as I was working. It was a very abusive environment. They call it hostile work environment. Yeah, that's exactly what I got. A very hostile work environment. So all those years I was just wondering, why me? Why are these things happening? Why the injustices that are just so blatant, so great in just so great? And during all those years I was teaching too, I moved to a different school district, and I was always wondering, maybe the next district will be much better, and I did all that. I changed even grade levels. And by the way, I became a special education teacher. I don't think I mentioned that. I was a special education teacher. I pursued that because I knew there was going to be a lot of need, and I always wanted to help those that were the most in need. And so that's what I did. And I never got married. And that was another thing. I know it takes too long, but yes, I was in long-term relationships at the time. None of them, of course, were Christian, because I left the faith too. And by the way, I thought that because I was no longer affiliated with a church, a building, I thought there's no way God would, want me, just that in itself. That in itself, I thought if I don't have a church, then, and also there was no internet back in that time too. So I had no access to any sermons, any word of God. I mean, there's no influence anywhere in my Los Angeles area county that I could really say, wow, this is godly. Wow, this is so Bible. I didn't have it, it just wasn't around me. I can just say that. Oh, by the way, when I was in college, a girl my age came up to me and she asked me, "Hey, I know of this religious group and we meet." And I would tell them, well, I don't have transportation to get there. And they would say, "Oh, no worries, well, we can come pick you up." And there were so many people of my age and everything, so I accepted their offer. And then after a few times that I met with them, they said, "Okay, now it's time for you to get baptized." I go, "Baptized? Oh, well, when?" "Well, on Sunday." I mean, I was like, "Oh no, Sunday, no, I can't get baptized on Sunday." And I told them why. I said, "No, Sunday is not a day." I wasn't going to any church at the time, mind you. I said, "No, so I just know I cannot do it on Sunday. I do not believe in Sunday." And and they would say, "Well, why? Why not?" And I told them, "Well, I grew up Seventh-day Adventist." And they would ask me, "Well, why aren't you a Seventh-day Adventist member then?" And I just say, "Because I'm not." I didn't want to go into it. But I said, "No, I can't." So then they said, "Well, in that case, you can't continue coming to our group." And I knew in the back of my mind, and by the way, I was in my early 20s then, that I would, I would not have the benefits that a group like theirs could provide, because I'm sure they would do activities, you could know people, you could network, I could see all of that. But I said no, so I declined. And so I continued living on my own, without really any friends or family around me. That is very true. The whole time I had no friends or family, other than my immediate relationship that I had at the time. Um, and needless to say, when I was 39 and a half, uh, God, and a lot of people say, "How did he come to you?" Um, I honestly don't know how he came to me, because I didn't see God. I didn't hear him audibly either. Like, I didn't hear a voice, but I know that I understood. I understood what he was saying to me. And that was when I purchased my home in 2014. I had purchased a home near my work there, and I thought, wow, I made it. I made it. I have a house. I was able to put 20% down. And I was like, I put that down. I signed the paperwork for that house. It was all like, I've achieved this much. I am a tenured teacher, so I have, I thought I would always be there. And even though it was very difficult, I was used to the abuse. So it's like the only thing I knew. It's like, where else would I go? And I was so blinded in so many ways. It's just not even funny how blinded. I mean, looking back, of course, it's all retrospective. Um, but in 2014, before then, though, I was watching a lot of YouTube sermons, especially during the summer when I had time off. And my earlier years, there was no internet, and I didn't have time to take summers off because I was so poor. I needed to work on some summers too. The reason I say this is because I finally started to have more time, like during the summers, that I could actually reflect on my life, and I could actually sit and think about what my life was about. Before, it was just so much commotion and so much work all the time. My mind just couldn't take any more. And so I could understand why so many people are still blinded, because of all the responsibilities and pressure of the world. You don't have the time or energy for God at that point. So summers when I was off, I was starting to, and then I was like, wow, in the internet, there were a lot of things that were, wow, so biblical. And I started to realize, wow, this is Satan's world for sure. I mean, Satan is running everything. And it started to dawn on me. I started also listening to Walter Veith, and I was like, yeah, I can see that. Yeah. Puzzle pieces were starting to come together. I was starting to see the picture of the puzzle, is all I can say to kind of summarize it. um Things were starting to come back, and not only that, I was starting to remember Ellen White's writings for some reason. Like, I remembered what she used to say about labor unions, and the labor union specifically I was under was so corrupt, and it's the California Teachers Union. And as I researched, the California Teachers Union is the largest, most powerful labor union, not only in the country, but in the world. I didn't know that before until I researched it. The California Teacher Unions, in case anyone doesn't know, it is the most powerful labor union in the world. And that was what I was under. Out of all things, that's what I was under. And I just remembered what Ellen White said about labor unions. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I can see the corruption for sure, all the way down to the pits of hell. And I knew I could not be there. I knew that I could not be found in that environment when God comes. And I also knew if my life did not continue long enough to be when God comes, I also can't be there either. So, for example, I knew if I died today, I don't want to be in this environment and die here. You know what I'm saying? Like, I knew I had to get out for so many reasons, because I was in the Southern California area, which is probably the most demonic areas you can possibly be in. Um, I know the whole Loma Linda environment. My family, as they moved from Los Angeles, we thought we were doing better to go into the Loma Linda area. But if anybody knows, it's a very, very corrupt area of the Adventists. So, um, those things were all brought up to my attention. And in any case, going back to when God converted me, that was in April of 2014. He just let me know, Nancy, you're my daughter. In a nutshell, I'm your father. That was the biggest thing. I knew, like, he's my father. And he said, I know everything about you. I know everything, even when you were still in your mother's womb. And yeah, he just told me. I understood that. And not only that, he reminded me of the 10 Commandments. In my mind, I remembered them. And not only did he remind me those, but he also reminded me so many times that I broke them. Like, he showed me it like in a movie. Like, remember this? And I was like, yes. And I couldn't believe that that's what I did. And I just couldn't believe it. And I literally broke down at the fourth commandment. The fourth commandment, like the first commandment, I thought, wow, this is like a dagger right in my heart. And I thought, wow, I'm going to die here. Then the second one, of course, another dagger, the third one. By the time the fourth dagger pierced, I was done. I basically just broke. I broke down, and I begged him to please forgive me for what I have done. And yeah, and he said I have 6 more commandments. And I remember saying, no, please, no, 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 I can't do 6 more right now. And he said, don't worry, Nancy, I'm here with you. And he embraced me, and he did remind me all the 10, which was really, really hard for me. Very, very difficult. And that's a proof right there that it was God who was showing me that. And I did say to him, and he said, I protected you all those years. And he showed me specific times, specific events in my life where he protected me. I mean, he showed me specifically. He reminded me, because I knew them, of course, but he said, what happened, that I protected you there, that time. Yes, I protected you then too. And I couldn't understand why he would protect me. And I even said to him, I was no longer with you. I wasn't praying to you. I wasn't reading your word. Why did you do that? And he just let me know, because of who he is. And he let me know since then, I know my value. See, before then, I didn't value anything really about me other than what I would achieve, what I would gain. But myself, I was empty. I had no sense of being. I had no sense of belonging either. And he gave me all of that in an instant. And since 2014, he told me, you have to move. And I said, move? I just bought this house. What do you mean move? I just purchased this house. Well, he said, you have to keep praying for me to guide you, because you have to do country living. You've always known that since you were little. You knew what I said about living in cities. You knew that. He reminded me basically just about every core thing I needed to know. He reminded me that evening. And I kept praying. And in 2019, literally 6 months before the whole COVID came out, I moved to the countryside in eastern Oklahoma near Arkansas. And I've been here ever since. I know the huge difference that I've been experiencing living out in the country, because I'm able to be independent, meaning I have my own place. I don't have to pay anyone for mortgage or rent. And so I can call the shots of where my time will be for. And my time is really to catch up on God's word. I'm trying to make up for all that lost time, understanding God's word and God's will for my life and for everyone that I come across. And that is the most important thing in my life. There is nothing else that supersedes. And the last thing, I guess, detail I should say is that night too, that very night, I threw away all my worldly music, because I had lots of CDs, lots of DVD movies. So when I was in the world, those things were my drugs. Was entertainment was my drug. In movies, all of that. I threw I literally brought in the trash bin into my house, and I threw everything. And I was asking God to not, I didn't ask God, don't kill me. I asked him, please kill me after I throw the last thing away. And I'm doing it as fast as I possibly can. I couldn't do it any faster because I knew it was an emergency. I knew I had to get rid of all of that. I had also Eastern philosophy books, astrology type of books, all of that I knew had to be in the trash. And I was begging God to please forgive me for all of those things. I threw away my makeup, my inappropriate clothing that was worldly. I knew I had like mini skirts and things like that. I had to throw those away. Uh, and then like a month later, I canceled my Netflix because I had Netflix at the time. It took me about a month after I was like, I was convinced there's nothing really good on Netflix. I have to and it was getting trashier by the minute. And I was like, I have to cancel that. I did cancel my regular television. The very next business day, I knew I had to cancel television, so I did that. So for about a month, I only had Netflix, and I let go of that one too within a month. And so and also I said, and I was single then at the time, and I said to God, how am I going to find a godly person? And of course I haven't, but I would never be in a relationship because I also rebaptized, by the way. I rebaptized because I baptized the first time when I was 13. And so I rebaptized. I knew that night that I wanted to get rebaptized. And I did in the Murrieta Seventh-day Adventist Church in Riverside County. And but what was I gonna say? Yeah, God told me, you married me. I married God. That was my point. I married God. So which means God comes first in everything and in everything. So that includes if I don't meet someone that loves God at least as much as I do, then there is nothing. Then there can never be even a consideration of that. And many have told me that that's too extreme, but I don't think so. So yeah, my 40s are coming and going, and I don't care anymore because I know that God is coming soon. And versus before, I thought, my life was nothing if I was not in a relationship. I thought, what could my life be without a relationship? But now my relationship is with God. So I think that's pretty much in a nutshell. Sorry, I went over the 30 minutes, but
No,
that was
you're good. No, you're good. I'm just absorbing what you're saying, Nancy. Thank you very much. Now, where was your conversion to the one true God and His Son? What time frame?
Oh, yes. That was when I moved here in 2019. When I moved here, I had this older couple living about an hour away from me in the real country, and they are Sabbath keepers. And they told, no, I'm sorry, it was the lady that they're with told me about. However, when I did become a one true believer, they let me go, the older couple, because they said that I was being a heretical against the Holy Spirit. And so they stopped talking to me. But the lady one lady that they knew brought that to my attention. And then I also started to see YouTube channels. Yeah, that's what it was. She told me, oh, have you seen Judgment Hour and a few other Nader Mansour's sermons? And so and then when I knew about it, I was like, of course. I personally never ever believed that there was a third person. So like, to me, I was just shocked that they even had that belief system, because that was never brought up to my attention. I never was told, okay, here's the Holy Spirit is a third person. Never. I always knew God the Father and his only begotten son Jesus, who I always was, like I said, when I was young, I was like, Jesus is everything. You always want to go meet Jesus, you know. And then through him you get to the Father, who's also my Father, by the way. I always knew that God the Father is my Father too. He's Jesus' Father and he's my Father. So that's what I remember growing up, you know, believing. So I guess the best way I can describe it is that to me it was shocking that anybody would say something other than that. You know, it's like, what do you mean? What do you mean the Trinity? I didn't like, yeah, just the very word Trinity is so Catholic too. Like, it's just so Catholic. Like, you never read it in the Bible. It's just not even close, right? So that's just my perspective. So to me, it was just like, of course.
Wow, wow. The powerful part is you have two fathers, one biological father, and the other was a civil or
Mm.
stepfather, they call it. And now you know that the one true God. And now I like everyone. Let me